Hey, what is up everyone? Danny and Alex. Today we're going to be looking at some different types of choking techniques you can do as a beginner practitioner in Jiu-Jitsu. So check it out. All right, the first technique we're going to be looking at is the cross collar choke. All right, so basically you want to bring your hands on each side of his neck, cross them over inside his jacket, and I'll put the squeeze on to finish this technique. But there's a lot of details in this technique. So the first thing we're going to look at is putting our hand with the palm towards the ceiling first. All right, so we're going to insert 4 fingers inside the jacket. Now sometimes I like to open the jacket with the opposite hand. That way there I make like a nice tracking here where I can follow the 4 fingers inside, and I bring the index finger right along where the tag is, right behind his neck. Now the thumb stays on the outside. Once I pass the ear line, I squeeze and I hold the gi, the garment, really tight, okay? Now the second hand right here, it can go across here. It won't make any difference. But a lot of times his chin's gonna be buried inside like this, so there's no space to bring that hand. So ideally, you're gonna bring your hand underneath your first hand and I'll squeeze on the opposite side as such. Now you have an X with your arms, and now you just squeeze and pull gently to finalize the choke. Now what you don't wanna do is bring the elbows out or forcing with your forearms. You just wanna bring the body weight into the choke. All right, so one more time. So here, open the gi, bring 4 fingers inside his jacket, right behind his neck. Now the opposite hand will go inside, underneath that first arm, go across, and it's almost like your thumbs are touching behind his neck. Now squeeze in, and one more detail is always make sure that the edge, that knife bone of your wrist is against his neck, not the flat part. Okay, so here, 1, and now pull him down into the cross collar choke. Now the next technique we're going to look at is the guillotine choke from the guard. Okay, so here, a lot of times the hands are going to be at your sides, and now you would go for a kimura attack. So look, facing the camera, you'd sit up and attack this arm. I'll do it on the opposite side so you guys can see. If I were to attack this arm on this side, a lot of times if he starts to hide that arm around my waist, what's going to happen now, look, it also exposes his neck. So we're going to bring our elbow across the back of his neck, and now have a seat, post up on your palm, and look, keep a loose hand, loose arm, so that way there you're not stiff and there's a lot of space. It's almost like your arm is like a spaghetti arm, and I'll bring this underneath his chin. Okay? Now once you have this position, your palm that's behind you is going to help you adjust your seating, and now bring this arm across into a seatbelt position, go back into your closed guard position, and sink in the choke. All right, so let's look at how you position your hands for this. So once you have the neck here, you're gonna go 1, and this arm is gonna swim through and hold your own wrist. Now you close the gap and you lean into the choke. All right, so one more time. We're here, maybe we go for the kimura attack. Go 1, have a seat, he blocks. Now wrap here, stay heavy, so that way there he can't posture up. Have a seat and adjust your hips, boom. Now you have more space to bring the wrist inside. Keep the hand open. If you close your fist and you're stiff, there's not going to be a lot of space here. If you keep the palm nice and loose and open fingers, look, it swims right across underneath the chin. And now you go seatbelt position, lock your closed guard position, and then from here, finalize the choke. Now the next technique we're going to look at is the choking from the technical mount position, also known as the single wing choke. Why? Because you're going to hold one of his arms. So in this position here, we're going to use our strongest arm to push the lapel across the head like this, right underneath his chin. Now I want to get the full garment, have everything snug against the neck. All right, so if it's too tight, sometimes just open it up and start pushing down. Now the reason why I suggest always push the garment down is because you're going to use the opposite hand here to catch the garment. And what we're going to do is always try to emphasize that you don't catch in front of his chin like this, because a lot of times they're going to tuck their chin in. Now if you get here, all you're doing is trying to apply the choke onto his face. Now what we want to do here is apply the choke across the neck. So what we're going to do here, we're going to push, try to bring the garment all the way across, and look, now it's across to this position. We're going to bring our opposite arm against the elbow, and look, you're going to pull with the collar, but also push with your free hand into the single wing choke. So once again, the person turned from your mount position, you have one leg up, controlling the hip. You're pushing the garment across, controlling that lapel, feeding it to the opposite side, and you want to circle around his neck. So one side is going to be his own jacket, and the opposite side is your wrist bone. All right, so it's important to understand that you want to circle around both sides of the neck to apply the proper pressure for the collar choke. Now you lean onto your own lap, one, and you bring this around the head and push into the choke. All right, the last technique, I'm going to demonstrate from a kneeling position, but in reality you can do it from the back control, leaning to your left or right side. You can do it when your opponent's facing down and you're on top of them. Or if your back is on the mat, but you have the back control with the opponent's back against your chest. All right, but I'll demonstrate from this position here. So the rear naked choke is a basic classical choke that we do in Jiu-Jitsu. What we want to do is bring the arm nice and loose around the neck. Just like the previous technique, you want to loop and go circling around his neck. So we want to ensure that our bicep is snug against one side of his neck, but our forearm muscle is across the opposite side. So you're creating a V shape in front. So in other words, your elbow should be pointing in the same direction as his chin. All right? So it's important when you do this technique that you have this mechanic. If you try to do it in this manner, it's not going to be the same type of choke. This here is going to be more of a nair choke, or also what happens when you're beginners, a lot of times what happens here, they do the choke improperly and then they start to crank here and then they injure their partner's neck. And this is one of the reasons why this type of choking technique is a controversial technique for the people who are not educated in Jiu-Jitsu, simply because a lot of times they don't know how to do the proper technique and they go here and they start to crank and then they injure their partner's neck. All right? The purpose of the rear naked choke basically is to stop the circulation going to the head so the person would pass out, right? So it looks a little bit more aggressive as a technique, but it's actually a very gentle technique because basically, instead of injuring the person, they're just gonna fall asleep. In Jiu-Jitsu, we simply tap and the person lets go. So let's go on to the technique once again. We go around. Once we are in this position here, we're gonna bring our hand onto our own bicep. Once it holds the bicep, this hand has two directions it can go. The first one, behind your partner's head before you sink in the choke. And the second one, which is a variation I want to teach you guys, is once you control here, you bring this one behind your own head from here and sink in the choke. Now, the proper mechanic is once you have everything tight, you lock it in. Once it's locked in here, you lock everything in tight. Now you bring your shoulder blades behind you, breathe in some air so you can expand your chest and let the choke do its work. So one more time, here we are. We get into the rear naked choke position. If the chin is aligned where your wrist is, all you'll simply do here is push the face back into the crook of your elbow right here, right? Now lock it up, sink it in here or here, and take a nice deep breath and let the technique work its magic. All right, guys, so there you have it, some basic fundamental choking techniques for Jiu-Jitsu. Hope you enjoyed this video. Leave us a thumbs up, and if you are new here, make sure to subscribe for more videos just like this one. We'll see you
in the next video.
Take care.